Good evening. Let's have a call to order and the roll call.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Julia Beckman.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Keith Mattoon.
Here.
And Terry Pavicic.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Let's stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I believe we're starting with a student perspectives from South High School.
That's correct. Good evening. Several years ago, we added a piece to our writing center to focus on literacy and having students help students with the writing. So under the direction of Mr. Joe Giocaris and Ms. Kathleen Skinner, they oversee the peer tutors as part of our literacy center. We have 3 of our senior tutors here that would like to explain a few things that they go through to help their peers and how that helps themselves. We have Amanda McCash, Abby Cargill, and Roland Arouche.
The purpose of our peer tutors program is basically to provide an opportunity to students to be tutored by their peers instead of by their teachers, which helps them to learn things in a new way and from a new perspective. And it also provides a great opportunity for students to contribute to the community in a meaningful and very fun way. I've had the privilege to be a part of this program for 3 years, so I've seen it come a very long way since my sophomore year. Last year we switched over to the center being run by Mr. Giocaris and Mrs. Skinner, and that brought a lot of positive changes, including more organization and better systems to keep track of our clients. And this year we've expanded the Literacy Center quite a lot. We now include not just tutoring for English-related assignments, but also assignments in science and social studies. So if you have a difficult reading guide or you're not understanding something you're learning in science or social studies, you can come down to the Literacy Center and we will help with students that are struggling in those areas as well. And we've also expanded to allow not just students to come down to the Literacy Center, but we're actually sending out tutors to various classrooms, either on a weekly basis, or maybe if there's a difficult project or students are really struggling with a concept. And this gives both the students and the tutors new experiences, as well as helping out the teachers. I'm really excited to see where this program is going to go for the rest of this year. And now we have Amanda to talk a bit about what a tutoring session looks like.
Hi, I'm Amanda, as Abby said, and I am a peer tutor. I've been there for about 2 years now. It's really a quite cool experience. Usually when the student walks in, there's, us sitting at the table, and we try and make them feel as warm and welcome as possible. We make them feel really comfortable. Generally, right now it's just freshmen, so it's a little bit more work into that because, they're shy little freshmen. We talk to them, like we ask them, their name and what grade they're in, and who their teachers are and whatever. And then we start the tutoring process where we sit next to them, not just across from them, like a teacher would. We sit next to them, we read their passage or their essay or whatever they need help with, and we explain whatever it is that they need help with, like if they need help coming up with a main idea statement or finding evidence for a certain point or trying to come up with a link to create a link between evidence and the main point. It all works together with all the different subjects, like with English, because literacy is part of every subject. It's part of science for reading guides. It's part of history for history books and understanding how things worked back then. So it really comes into play in a lot of different subjects, and that's why it's really good thing that we've changed the Literacy Center to include all those different subjects. So us having the freshmen and other students, of course, bring in those different subjects has really been beneficial to their overall academic standing. So we basically have that tutoring session with them for, usually it's about 20 minutes. Sometimes it carries over to the next period, for lunch. But yeah, they just, we sit next to them and we help them, and it really does improve their different subjects and different literacy problems or whatever. And as for myself, what I get out of the experience, it's not just about, it's good on college applications, or it's, good for whatever reason, in a system. It's more like the feeling, because, it helps me, because people say that you learn best when you can teach something. So it not only has helped me in those other regards, it's helped me become a better student in myself, and it's also helped me become a better person in general. Like, teaching other people is a really great thing to do, and I never knew I could get such joy from doing something like that. So I've really enjoyed it. And here's willing to talk about how he's integrated himself into the different programs now.
Good evening, and I'm Roland. I'm a first year peer tutor. Abby and Amanda have experience, but this is my first time actually getting acquainted with being a peer tutor. I got recommended last year by my 8th period teacher, Mr. Kuhn, and he told me what being a peer tutor is all about and the process that you have to go through. And I was very excited for it, but at the same time I was very nervous, because I don't know how I was going to be as a peer tutor, and how that was going to go about. But luckily Mr. Giacaris, he emailed me that summer or in the spring, and he talked about the dates and the process that we're going to go through peer training. And being there, it was great, because first of all, you get to interact with 30 plus students who all have great ideas and who can contribute all well, and that's something that you can learn from them. And having somebody like Mr. Giacaris and Miss Skinner help you give you feedback and help on like assignments that you're working on is really great. And I really learned a lot from them and the students. Going through the tutor process and tutoring kids is really great. It's good teaching the kids how to become better writers, and that's one thing that you can really take from all that, is making sure that these students are becoming a better writer. And it's not necessarily about writing the perfect paper. We all don't write the perfect paper, but as long as these students are improving every single day, it's going to be worth the while. So but I can speak for all of us that we're very honored and privileged to be peer tutors, and for this school, and it's great. Thank you.
Did anybody have any questions?
I have one. How do you know how are you matched up with the students that you're going to tutor?
Well, we can be matched up with anybody, but what we try to do is find somebody that's tutoring that period that has maybe had that same teacher as the client, or who has read that book, or been a part of that science curriculum or whatever, because that makes it easier for you to help that student. But oftentimes that's not the case. We'll have a freshman that comes in with a book that no one's ever read before. So then someone will volunteer to take up that challenge, which it is kind of difficult, but you learn a lot too from tutoring somebody on something that you've never worked on personally.
I was just going to, I may have missed it, but how many students are you working with right now? Do you have an idea of the total number?
I think we're at around 70 tutoring sessions already this year, and that's pretty good.
It sure is, yeah. Thanks.
And can students come to see you independently, or do they need to be referred by a teacher?
It really can be either. Sometimes the teachers recommend it to the students. If they're having like a certain troubles in a class and the teacher notices a pattern, then they'll come to us. They can also come to us just like if they have an essay that they want to get checked out before they turn it in, or if they get it back from the teacher and it's not the grade that they wanted, they can come see exactly what it is that they did wrong and try to correct it with us. It's really their own prerogative, or it can be the teachers.
I may have missed it. How many total tutors do we have?
57.
57 total. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Roland mentioned the training they go through.
Yeah.
They came in over the summer to be trained on how to work with kids, other kids. So
Wow.
they gave it their own time this summer to prepare for this.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Do any of you plan to go into education? Never mind, next question. So, what a gift you've given. And let me tell you that you don't have to be in education to be a teacher for the remainder of your life. So, I think speaking for everybody, I just say thank you. What a wonderful gift you've given us.
That's right.
Thank you.
Keep
Thank
up
you.
the good work.
Well
Should be
done.
very proud.
Thank you.
Moving on to word workshop.
Okay, Dr. Kupka, we have several presentations tonight. We've arranged the room so that the persons making presentations will be seated right down there. The first group is something off the board's parking lot. Presentation by SASED. We are, District 99 is part of SASED. And our students from District 99 take advantage of their programs, and they are very much a part of our special education continuum services. So tonight we have the Executive Director, Dr. Michael Volpe, Nan Diamond, Director of Programs and Services, and Sam Kanata, Director of Business. So Dr. Volpe, you're on.
Well, thank you very much, and I got to tell you, it's really challenging to come behind those three very eloquent and well-spoken and poised young folks, and that's awesome. And I was disappointed that none of them are going into teaching, but we can still recruit them. Yeah, we've got time. I'm really very, very honored to be here with you this evening and to take this opportunity to share with you about our organization. As Dr. McDonald said, you are a significant part of our organization, and we try to be a significant part of your district. And what we're going to do tonight is give you a little bit of an overview of the organization, our services, but also talk about our relationship specifically with District 99. The packets in front of you have some information, and they also have captured the slides that we're going to go through. Okay. Well, first of all, we all refer to our organization as SASED, and just briefly, that stands for the School Association for Special Education in DuPage. SASED is a special education cooperative. It's also referred to as a joint agreement. Again, multiple school districts get together to provide the full continuum of services, as Dr. McDonald referred to, and our service is then to support that full continuum, whether it be through programming, whether it be through professional development, support, staff, and we'll review a lot of that this evening. Now, there's two types of joint agreements. There's an administrative district, which is what SASED is. That means we have one of our member districts act as a fiscal and legal entity for us. That happens to be District 66. But that role in relationship to SASED is purely an advisory role. We are a very large organization, and as Sam will share with you our budget, our personnel. We have over 560 employees. We have a budget of over $55 million at this point. So our engagement with our fiscal agent is just perfunctory legal requirements. The other type of joint agreement is a legal entity. Now, legal entity basically stands as a special education district, if you will. Again, SASED is set up very much like that organizationally, and we have one member of each of our districts representing the individual districts, as you've had Julia representing District 99 for pretty darn close to 20 years at this point. Julia's been seated since 1997 on the SASED board and actually served 10 years as our board chair. She now has the dubious distinction of being the longest serving board chair, but it was a great experience for me because as I came in my first year as executive director, Julia was my first and my best board chair since that time.
Thank you, Mike.
But again, just a little bit more history about joint agreements. There are 67 joint agreements in the state of Illinois. 40 of them are structured as SASED is as an administrative district, and 27 of them stand as legal entities. Regardless of the status, the benefits of being a part of a special ed cooperative or a joint agreement is pretty much consistent across the board in all the organizations. While they may have different structures, different sizes, the point of sharing programs and services, the cost efficiencies that we can provide in terms of staffing, professional development, classrooms, the specialized training, the legal and procedural resources. The director of the co-op stands as the state-approved director of special education for all the member districts. So the ability to process legal forms, requirements through the cooperative is a minor administrative benefit, but one of the things that the state does look at. And additionally, as we can provide staff and services, we can also provide supports and administrative supports to services that are often difficult for districts to do on a one-person basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Briefly, the first joint agreement was established in 1957. SASED was established in 1958. We started with 35 members. Throughout the course of our history, we did have all districts in DuPage County at one point. We did have the 42 districts feeding through SASED. At this point, we serve, as I've said, 18 districts. We've been stable at that number for over 15 years, but there's been several different reconfigurations in our history. There are 4 other cooperatives that serve DuPage County. CASE, NEDSEC, and the LADSI organization also serves districts in DuPage as a cooperative, but then there's also the big independent districts that you're aware of, the 2 Naperville districts, Wheaton, and one more that's escaping me at the moment. What?
204.
204. Yeah. But again, we are one of the oldest and largest in the state right now. We're the second oldest in the state, the 3rd largest in terms of the number of actual member districts. SASED also has the privilege of operating more state grant programs than any other agency other than NISB at this point. We do operate the former PBIS grant, the autism grants, the Parent Educator Project grants. They are now all under the umbrella of the Illinois State Technical Assistance Coalition, which we also hold a grant for. But where we become a little bit more distinct is that SASED serves the largest number of districts in the state based on our regional support of the DuPage West Cook organization. Very proud of our students, and throughout this, hopefully you get a few pictures of some of them. But the DuPage West Cook organization, it's a regional, extraordinary cooperative, if you will, that provides low incidence programming for students in DuPage and West Cook counties. But we are a collaboration of 92 school districts, including our 18 members. When we talk about low incidence services, those are things like students who are visually impaired or blind, deaf or hard of hearing. We provide those services, those programs, those supports, audiology, hearing aid repairs and supports. We do all of this for that larger catchment area. So beyond our own member districts, the larger effort we make with DuPage West Cook also just supports the idea that our mission as an organization is to provide this leadership and to support this full continuum of specialized services for all of our members. Now, structurally, very quickly, we are organized much like a school district. We have the Board of Control, Our executive director stands as a superintendent, and I have the 4 departments of programs and services, such as curriculum and instruction, business operations, HR, and technology. What we support under that are programs and district administrators. We have 12 program and service administrators in the organization, analogous to principals, if you will, with those levels of building and student responsibilities. And then we also support our district administrators. Briefly, this is the group of 18 member districts that SASED serves, and you'll note that we do serve the 4 feeder districts into the high school that are in DuPage. Wanted to share a little bit about special ed enrollment across the member districts. The state average at this point is 14.1% of students enrolled across the state of Illinois do receive some level of special education services, do have an IEP, an individual education program. As you'll see as we go through these lists, the SASED member districts, the percentages range from a low of around 8% to a high of closer to 18%. What we've noticed actually in a trend on all of our member districts over the past 3 years is that while general enrollment in school districts have maintained steadiness or decreased a little bit over the last 3 years, the enrollment in special education has decreased. And I think that's a testimony to the work that all of the districts have been doing with interventions for students before they get identified as needing special education services. And that's been a big push from our organization to support in the districts, but they've really taken up that charge. What I've also included is the number of students in each district that are served by SASED directly, and those would be the students receiving services in our programs, not those served in your home districts by some of our personnel. We highlight District 99's numbers, and again, the special education average number of students with IEPs in the district is below the state average, and SASED's 23 that are being served by our programs, again, amounts to about a 3.4% of your identified special education population, which is under the total of our about 5% service rate for all of our member districts. Sorry, I'm a little dry. So, wanted to give you a picture of what the comparison looks like across the high school and unit districts in SASED. SASED has 12 elementary districts, 3 high schools, and 3 units. We run from, again, a large unit district like 205 to our smaller unit districts like Lisle and Westmont. But our high schools, with District 99 being the largest, you can see the numbers, the percentage of folks that are being served directly in SASED and the numbers comparatively of students with disabilities identified in each. And another comparison, again, of the percentages of students being served. So, tried to just give you a little brief background numbers, but the meat and potatoes comes next when we talk about the programs and services.
Okay. So there's our Wheel of Fortune. So on the left side is all the programs that SASED operates on behalf of our districts. And on the right side is our services. So in your packet, there's a detailed description of all the programs that are available. We rent basically 52 classrooms across 22 schools across DuPage County. So we don't necessarily have a facility other than the Southeast Alternative School, but we rent from 1 classroom in one building to 3 classrooms in another building, but a total of 52 classrooms across DuPage County. In terms of services, what happens is every year, SASED puts out a menu of services that includes kids that are tuitioned into some of the programs that you have on the left side, as well as some services on the right side. So services like on OT and PT, or perhaps IST, which is our instructional support team, you buy percentage of days based on what your projects or what your initiatives are based in your district. So based on your, like for this year, Scott Wugezer is planning 10 mini trainings for the teacher assistants within District 99. We have 25 students that are getting deaf and hard of hearing services, pushed in services into District 99 into North and South building. We have 16 students that are receiving visual itinerant services within North and South. We have assistive technology that is working with individual students and working on reading and writing software for teachers on behalf for students. So professional development, we do the Spring Institute is a big one, but we do online, and we do also training all year round based on district initiatives and feedback that we give surveys every year. At Spring Institute last year, we had 1,300 people participate in our professional development. We have diagnostics, again, psychological services, audiological services, ear molds, and whatnot. So we have services that are based on IEP minutes, and we have services based on the number of days, based on your initiatives that you have within your districts. So our services, our newest programs are our Directions and our Connections programs. That is SASED's attempt to answer districts' responses for more continuums of services. The Directions program is our first therapeutic day program that we have. We house in District 25. Our Connections program is for more of those students that are actually needing some social, emotional, and peer practices in terms of that domain, along with some educational training. So those kids are at the junior high level. So this is basically kind of all we have. It is a very fluid type of programs, and it is very responsive to what you need. We based it on our discussions at our district admin meeting about needs and services. So this changes from year to year. All right. So we also participate in a lot of community projects. Bernie's Book Bank, we did a big drive for that, made many books, sent many books to a lot of kids. Okay. So in terms of SASED program enrollment, our biggest program is the multi-needs program. Again, for that one, we have 21 classrooms spread across 22 buildings. Our next one is probably our Southeast Alternative School, and so forth. So that's kind of the breakout of where the kids are spread over. We have 472 students that attend SASED programs. 342 are from our member districts, but 130 are from the DuPage West Cook. Those low incident programs are from the other 74 districts that Michael talked about. In terms of 99, this is kind of your breakout of where your kids are being sent. 14 students are currently being serviced at the Southeast Alternative School, and 2 at the Transition Facility, 5 in the Multi-Needs program, and 2 at the Vision program. Okay, we also do our plays and everything else. That's our deaf drama we have at the junior high. Okay, any questions for programs?
There was a lot of detail. It's good stuff.
I know we're sharing this quickly. I know you have a lot of presentations this evening, so we will hopefully have an opportunity to answer any questions. But wanted to really point out the parallels between SASED and a school district, and you know, that's part of what we're trying to share with you this evening. We're not just you know, just a specialized entity that's kind of strange and off there. As we do with our students, as we do with our programs, we are involved in extracurriculars, we are involved in community engagement, and we make every effort. Our mission is to make every effort to get these kids, if they do come to us to be served directly, to get these kids integrated back into their home communities as successfully as possible. Whether that can be through their home school, hopefully, but for some of the kids who will always be instructed by us because of the specialty or the significance of their needs, we make a conscious effort to make sure that their communities are they are addressing their community needs. They're addressing their community engagement. We don't do an isolation. That's why Nan said we don't have buildings that we segregate and separate students in. We rent spaces from our member districts to do our services in and integrate as much as possible. Just want to share a little bit more then organizationally about human resources. I did say that, you know, we do have over 560 employees at this time. We have, again, the personnel wheel of fortune, the type of specialties that we have speech therapists, social workers, psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. That's where we do a great deal of support for our member districts. The 63 OTs and PTs we have right now we've kind of cornered the market on them. Anybody who knows school systems at this point knows how difficult it is to find occupational and physical therapy services and have folks directly work for you as opposed to contract from an agency. We have these on staff, and again, because of our ability to provide great supervision for them and professional development for them as a group, we're able to provide that at a reasonable cost to our member districts as opposed to everybody contracting or trying to find them on their own. But again, we have occupational, orientation and mobility specialists for our students with visual impairments. We have a BCBA. We have actually several BCBAs, which are board certified behavior analysts, which is a huge support system to students with autism. SASED has those available to not only our programming for autism, but to our member districts on a consultative basis as well. So anything that's here, these folks serve not only the SASED programs, but the SASED member districts. That's just how all of our supports are organized. The distribution of our staff, again, you know, the majority of our staff actually are support personnel. When we talk about support personnel, we're talking about classroom assistants, we're talking about aides. The challenges of a lot of our students require medical assistance in the classroom, multiple sets of hands in any given classrooms due to the physical or mobility limitations of a lot of our students. As Nan said, our multi-needs program, multi-needs meaning, you know, pretty self-explanatory. They have not only cognitive disabilities, but they have physical disabilities as well. Those students comprise a large majority of our population and also the support population. Now for the fun part of the presentation.
Hi, I'm Sam Kanata. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how SASED gets its money, how we spend our money, and some interconnections of how District 99 and SASED work together to fund the programs that we need to fund. So I want to start with the revenues. So at SASED, local revenues represent about 56% of our budget. Local revenues for SASED mean we go out and we invoice for services. A school district has a tax levy, they equalize assessed value, they have property values, and they develop a levy. They get then their revenues through property taxes. In a typical DuPage County district, local revenues, property tax revenues, represents between 70 and 80% of your budget. So comparing your budget to ours, more of your revenues come from, or more of a typical DuPage County school district's revenues come from local sources than SASED does. In SASED, about 31% of our revenues come from federal sources. And federal sources at SASED have three primary buckets. The one bucket is federal IDA funds. And these are funds for special education that the federal government sets aside and distributes to states. The states then distribute it to each district. And each district is based on your enrollment and your poverty counts. If a district is a member of a special education cooperative, instead of the district getting that money directly, it goes to your special education cooperative. Then at the cooperative level, there's decisions that are made in terms of how that money is spent. The second source of federal funding then is IDEA discretionary money, and that's that money that provides for these statewide grant projects that Dr. Volpe was speaking of. And so for SASED, between the different sources of funding for those statewide grants, that's about a $6 million piece of our budget. And then finally, SASED receives funding for Medicaid. And Medicaid funding on the federal level represents funding for students that are Medicaid eligible and additional funding for the administrative supports that provide for those students that are Medicaid eligible. And so for SASED, federal funding represents about 30% of our budget. In a typical school district in DuPage County, federal funding is about 5%. So discrepancy there in terms of how we're funded. The final source of funding then for SASED is state funding. And primarily the funding that comes through SASED is a categorical fund, and it's called personnel reimbursement. And in special education, for all your certified staff, for all your professional staff, you get $9,000 per employee for reimbursement towards the salary that you pay them. If they're non-professional staff, classroom assistants, you get $3,500 per professional. And so that money offsets the cost of providing instruction, but obviously doesn't really go that far. So, given that we know what it costs to hire and to maintain employees. So, and then we also get some special education transportation reimbursement money. We provide the transportation programs for our alternative school, and that's the piece of transportation, the money that we spend, and then we get reimbursed. We get reimbursed 80% of special education transportation, like districts do. In districts, they also receive some additional sources of state funding. They get general state aid, which, as a special ed cooperative, we're not eligible for. They also get some other varieties of state categorical funding. And some of those include Orphanage Act funding, it includes additional funding for special education students. It includes general education or non-special education transportation reimbursement. So there's another group of categorical funds that come to school districts from the state. And in a typical school district in DuPage County, state funding represents about 10 to 15% of their budget. And so at SASED, it's about 13%. So the percentages aren't that different, but the way we get the money is a little bit different. So, and Mark, feel free to interlude here if there's anything you can add in terms of percentages sound a little off or they're a little different in your district. Feel free to chime in for us.
Right, we're about 90% locally funded, about I think it's 7% state funded and 3% federal.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so that gives you an overview of where our money comes from. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how we spend our money and do a little bit of a comparison also with a typical school district in DuPage County. And again, Mark, feel free to kind of chime in if there's something a little bit different with District 99. So at SASED, we spend about 45% of our budget money on salaries. And in addition to that, we spend another 12% for benefits. And so combined, it's about 57%. And I would venture to say that in a typical school district in DuPage County, about 60% of your money goes towards salaries, is spent on salaries. In SASED, we spend about 17%, is that 16%? 16% of our money on transfers. And what transfers represent is money that SASED collects and then disperses to other school districts. And as I talked about the Medicaid funds and I talked about the IDEA funds, that money SASED collects and then it distributes back to school districts. And so that's our transfer piece. Now, local school districts also have some money like that. They send money back to SASED. So we're sending you money and you're sending money back to us. So, but in the end, we're being accountable in terms of being fair in terms of how that money is allocated. But typically, that kind of transfer money in a school district might be something like 5%. So there's a discrepancy there in terms of how we spend our money and how you spend your money. The purchase service line item, as we discussed, we don't own a lot of buildings. We rent space, so we've got to pay for that space. There's money involved in that. Also, the way we do our accounting, we want to be certain that when we send out bills, that they actually they reflect the services that are provided. So in our budgets, I do a lot of internal allocating of costs. So I've got a budget for OTs and PTs, but some of those OTs and PTs, they work in tuition programs. And so I do this allocation of putting some of those costs in that bucket for for the alternative school or for multi-need students. And so I accomplish that by this purchase service area. And so 17% of our money, it gets accounted for in that way. And obviously within a district, you're spending money on purchase services. That's all those services you go out and you purchase for all the kinds of contracts that you need to operate your school district. But typically, in a district budget, it might be more like 7 or 8% in terms of what you spend on purchase services. Then moving on, supplies, we spend about 2% of our money on supplies, and I'd venture to say that's probably close to what you spend here. On behalf payments represent the money we don't actually collect and we don't actually spend, but we're required to put it in our budget. And it represents the teacher TRS contribution for all your certified staff. And the state asks you to estimate that and put that on your budget forms, but it's money you don't actually take in or go out, or doesn't go out of your district. And at SASED, it's about 7% of our budget, but here, because at SASED, we hire less certified staff. We hire a lot of classroom assistants that assist teachers and work with our students that way. So most likely your allocation to on behalf payments is going to be more than 7%, maybe something like 12 or 13%, if I could hazard a guess there. And then finally, equipment. Again, we don't own buildings. What we do is we buy pieces of equipment, whether it's computer equipment. We don't spend a great deal of money on that, maybe 1%. But since you have to maintain buildings, you have to purchase buildings, you have to renovate buildings, that number can fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. But I would venture to say it'd be more like, in a typical year, 10 to 12% of your budget, where it's only 1% of SASED's budget. So that gives you an overview of how we get our money, how we spend it, and a little comparison to maybe how Mark spends his money. So,
how I spend their money.
How you spend their money. I always think of it as mine just because it's a good one. And so then I wanted to go a little more into detail about some of the financial interactions that SASED and District 99 have. And so these numbers are going to be a little bit off from what Mark would record, because it's money that runs through our books in a certain fiscal year. Based on the timing of when he might receive that money, his numbers might be a little bit different than ours. So the idea money that I spoke about, it's that money that SASED collects and then disperses to districts, was about $1 million in last year. At SASED, we distribute most of that idea money back into the school district. So we keep 5% of that to offset our administrative costs. We keep another 2.5% to provide for co-op-wide staff development programs. And so 93.5% of that idea money that we collect is distributed back to you, to your district for you to use on your programs locally. In terms of the Medicaid money for last year, was about $140,000. We were behind in collecting some of that, so really it was only half of what you should typically receive in any given year. So you might be a little bit off this year and kind of getting caught up on some of that money. So in total, in terms of money that comes through SASED and then becomes a revenue to your district, it's about $1 million a year that happens. Okay, and then finally, I wanted to just give you a brief overview of the money that District 99 spends for SASED's programs. And so last year, we billed for tuition and fee programs a little under $800,000. And I wanted to back up just a bit. We did talk a little bit about the menu of services, but I wanted to kind of give you an overview of how that works for us. The menu of services for us is a bit of a budgeting tool. So in the spring of the year, as we're looking to develop our budget, and we need to get our budget out before you do, what we do is we develop a menu of service. So we list all of our programs and we estimate costs for every program. And then we project your need for services for the coming year. And for programs, we know students move in and out of districts, IEP meetings occur, there's a lot of different dynamics in terms of what occurs and what services you're actually going to need. So for all those tuition and fee programs, we allow that to be just a budgeting tool. But the piece that we spoke about for the services, and that was the instructional support team and the assistive technology team, those we asked that they be commitments. And so based on those commitments, then we'll go out and we'll hire staff that'll be able to work in your districts. And for SASED, we feel that's a really important piece of what we do, because what it does is provides the opportunity to have these staff members work within your districts to help you keep your students local. And that's important because that's not only, it's not only good for costs in terms of it's the most efficient to educate your students locally, but it's also it's also cost effective as well. So, we do offer those services. We do offer those kinds of things that kind of help the district run as efficiently as possible. So, just wanted to bring that forward to you. And one last item is I want to talk about was how we work with our administrative fees. One model that some co-ops still use is an assessment-based billing for their administrative costs. And so how that works is develop a pot of money that you're going to need to cover your administrative costs, and then that money gets allocated. And typically it's allocated based on the size of the district. So a district with the highest enrollment, assumes the most of the costs for, or a bigger portion of the costs for administration of the co-op. And that's a model that we haven't used. But instead of using that model, what we actually do is we take our administrative costs and they all get allocated to each and every one of our programs. And so as a district purchases programs from SASED, they're in effect absorbing the cost of the administration. And so we think that's a good model because it doesn't really penalize the bigger districts just because they're big. It doesn't allocate more costs to the bigger districts. What it does is it allocates those costs based upon how much you use the services. So if you need a lot of SASED services, you're going to support the administration of SASED a little bit more. But if you're a big district and you do things independently and you don't really need our services, you're not going to have that burden. And so we think that's a very fair way of allocating the costs across the co-op, and it's something that we think has worked well for us. So that's the overview of business part of it.
Well, again, our intention was to give you as much of an overview and to maybe spend a few minutes on programs and services. As you can see, there's a couple other slides of some information about our strategic planning process, and again, just to highlight the fact that we structure ourselves and try and function very much like a district. But with respect to your time frame and the rest of your evening's agenda, I'm going to kind of say that we're very pleased to have been here this evening and to have been able to have shared some of this information with you. We have several key efforts coming down the road, working with transition, autism. As you heard, we have new programming opening up for students with severe mental health issues, which is a burgeoning problem in our area as well as in education. Everybody I know has been having conversations around PARC and curriculum and assessment, and we struggle with those same issues, but we also try to lead our member districts in the special education departments, particularly in DLM and with the assessments of students with disabilities. So again, we face the same facilities and funding questions and challenges that you do, and we just wanted to end by saying thank you for your ongoing support. Thank you for allowing Julia to come and play with us. We definitely appreciate that support as well. And we want to offer this opportunity for any questions. And thank you for your time, too.
I'm just wondering, in the near future, are you seeing concern about some funding issues at the federal, state level, given that it's such a large portion of your budget?
Yeah, the federal level's been kind of flat, and we're waiting for the reauthorization of IDEA and to see if there's going to be any significant changes there. We have greater concerns, as we said, when your budgets are affected, we're affected, and your ability to support services that we provide or look at increases. We're going in negotiations right now, and we're working with the same CPI numbers that you guys work with. That's how we start our conversations. So again, the financial challenges are extremely similar, but there's also conversations at the state level about special education reimbursement and some funding for extraordinary costs for students with special needs that we do receive from the state. That we continue to put our voice forward in that effort and trying to make that funding not only better equalized across the state, but fairer to cooperatives and school districts as well.
we are concerned about, Senate Bill 16, again, they would kind of restructure things, and we pulled money out of our pockets as well in terms of the allocation process. So, so that'd be a concern as well.
That was, I'll admit, that was a little behind my question, so it's the nature of what I was asking. Because we certainly have big concerns about it here, and what you do is so valuable and really economical, I think, in terms of the cooperative. It would be hard for any of the member districts to accomplish what you do.
That's for sure. Right. That's what we work towards. So thank you. Yes.
So, boy, it's real concern over funding going forward. So.
We're engaging in those conversations as much as we can, but following the lead of our members as well.
Very good.
I might add that Dr. Volpe is pretty visible throughout the state and in Springfield, and he's working with Lend, as Dr. McDonald does. They we hope they hear our voices, but his voice is there.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your presentation, and most of all, thank you for everything you do for our students.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, the Illinois Youth Survey.
Thank you, Dr. Kupka. Our next presentation will be about the results of the Illinois Youth Survey. Our students took that survey last spring. I believe we give it every 2 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or so. The purpose of the survey is to get information about our students' habits and behaviors. We're very interested in promoting healthy lifestyles. Probably the persons in our district most affected and most engaged in the healthy lifestyle discussions are Mrs. Benoist and Mr. Bullock, our Counseling and Student Support Services Department Special Needs Coordinators, or Special Assistance Coordinators. And so they are going to make the presentation this evening.
Thanks. I'm Diana Benoist, Student Assistance Coordinator at South. Thanks for having us. And we want to just give you a little bit of information about the Illinois Youth Survey itself, and then what some of the things we learned were this year. So we'll just review that for you, a little bit about student participation this year. We'll talk about some trend data in a broad way. We want to celebrate a lot of the positive trends and identify areas of future focus as well for us as we move forward in our prevention and intervention efforts. And then talk a little bit about our social norms marketing campaign that we're really kicking off this week with Red Ribbon Week at both schools, and talk about the student assistance program as a whole and our goals. So the Illinois Youth Survey really comes from the Center for Prevention Research and Development at the University of Illinois, and it's designed to gather information about all kinds of different social, emotional, health indicators, including substance use patterns and attitudes of Illinois youth. And so because Keith and I really focus very specifically on substance use, but on all kinds of behaviors and attitudes of students, we were very excited to be able to use this again this year. It's modeled after a national survey called Monitoring the Future Survey, which has been around since 1975. So a lot of the questions on the Illinois Youth Survey directly mirror those Monitoring the Future surveys, so we can look at national trend data as well as state data by giving this survey. So Illinois Youth Survey, very reputable, valid and reliable. It's been around since 1990, and it's funded by the state of Illinois, so it's at no cost to our district. Last year in 2014 was the first year that we could administer the survey for free to all students, grades 9 through 12. In the past, it's been only for 10th and 12th graders, so just those two. But we have at various times chosen to give it to all 4 levels, I believe, as well. So those are the years that we've done the survey. It is available every other year. So it's available, it was available in 2010 and 2012, but we did not do that. We did do it in 2008, 2014. So some of the information that we get from the survey is basic demographic information, a lot of which we already know. but we also get drug prevalence and behaviors, drug use and contributing factors. So in the prevention world, we talk about risk factors. So how, what are some things that are happening in students' lives that might make them more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors such as substance use? And then we also talk about protective factors. So what are the things in their lives that make it less likely for them to do those things? And so obviously our jobs are about trying to identify risk factors, decrease those when possible, but also really enhance those protective factors, a lot of which have to do with school connectedness and school climate. So we also get information about interpersonal conflict, violence, and delinquency, academic and school experiences overall, mental, social, and physical health. And then we had the opportunity to add some additional questions as a district, so up to 30 questions that we can design ourselves. So we took that opportunity to also include some questions about our PBIS programming. We added some additional questions about substance use with the intention of sharing that information with our students during our Red Ribbon Week and our social norms marketing campaign, which we'll tell you a little bit more about. So we think there's a lot of benefit in participating in this survey because the more we can know and understand about our students, the better we can meet their needs, basically. If we know what our students are thinking and feeling and doing, and when they have the opportunity to tell us that in an anonymous way, it's an anonymous survey, then we are hoping to get more information that we can use and share with them as well. So, looking especially over time, monitoring changes with our adolescent population, and we've just, even in the short term, have found a lot of ways to connect with students based on what we're seeing. So it's the basis of what we call our social norms marketing campaign. And social norms is based on what is the norm, right? So what are our students doing? We look at trying to educate students on the accurate perceptions about their peers' behavior. So, for example, we found that a lot of students overestimate how often their peers are drinking or using drugs. And they do that for a variety of reasons, but helping to give them the real picture and giving them that information is power, right? So just trying to be open and honest with them about here's what's really happening with students in our schools. So we gave the survey on March 18th last year. We did it during second hour, and we surveyed every student who was in attendance that day. So more than 85% of our students were surveyed, and all grade levels, and 98% of those surveys were processed for data. And what we mean by that is, there are reliability, validity tests built within the surveys. Some students don't answer all of the questions or flat out say that they're being, not truthful in the survey, but that accounted for a very small amount. So 90% of our surveys being counted as valid is very, very good. And obviously 85% sample size is an amazing sample size. So we feel like our data is very generalizable to our student population.
Thanks, Diana. I'm Keith Bullock. I'm the coordinator at North, and I want to thank you again for allowing us to be here tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends that we see from the data. So the data began rolling in the spring, late spring into the summer. In fact, we're going to continue to get data throughout the fall and into the winter. Some of the state and county data that we often use as comparables is not yet available. And when that becomes available, that gives us yet even more information to kind of know where we're at as a district, how we're doing with our programming and the supports that we put in place for students. It does confirm what our social norms marketing campaign is the focus of, which is that our students don't regularly drink alcohol or use substances, which when you ask sort of a general student population, sometimes even parents and adults, they might give you different information than that. But what we know is that the majority of our kids are not using, even the majority of our older kids are not using, and we really want to make sure that that message is clear and continues to be presented back to the students. So like Diana said, they have the power to make informed and educated decisions with the goal of actually reducing use. So if their perceptions are accurate, the goal ultimately is to reduce use overall. And we're seeing some of that as well already. Students reported that their primary activities with friends are non-substance related. So we gave them opportunities to share with us, what are you doing when you spend time with friends? And the vast majority of them said, when I hang out with my friends, I'm doing things other than drinking or using drugs, which is fantastic. Again, it's a very marketable concept and a set of data information that we can give back to our students that is really provocative and really, should, we hope that they'll internalize and continue to kind of make informed decisions about how they spend their time based on what their peers are doing as well. We've seen statistical declines in use compared with the 2008 data, which is also another good thing to see. So we've seen the fact that our current students are using less than the students in 2008. We know as well as we do have comparables with the 2012 state data. So even though we didn't participate in 2012, we're able to take a look at the numbers from the state during that survey period and compare it against 2014, and we see that in a lot of cases our student use is lower than the state in 2012. Our use generally mirrors national trends. In some cases it's lower to both national or to all of the national, state, and county trends. Something that we really found valuable in terms of information is that we have a very low incident rate for illicit drugs overall, extremely low for substances such as cocaine, meth, and heroin, which is of concern obviously for communities in our area. We do want to also maintain things that we're looking forward to in terms of how we want to focus our attention and our professional development and education. We want to sustain our social norms marketing campaign. So we started introducing some of this last year with national data, but as you can imagine, actually having our own numbers is so much more effective with students than sharing out what's going on across the nation. If we can say, here's what the kids in your school are doing or not doing, makes a huge difference. And so that's a sustaining effort we want to continue because we know that over time we'll be reaching more kids than we will just within a week. So this is not just something we're going to focus on briefly and then drop and move on to something different.
Did you have a question?
So how do you get that information out to the students? Are you tweeting? Are you talking about in classes?
Absolutely. So we actually did a workshop training today with student leaders that will be going in and facilitating the discussion for the Positively North and Mustang Way lessons tomorrow. So that's the sort of the thrust of the week for Red Ribbon Week in terms of prevention. So they're going to have an opportunity for anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes to be focusing on the data. So the data is the highlight. The actual numbers is the focus and the highlight. And so they'll be talking about the numbers. They'll be looking at that information. They'll be asking questions. They'll be posing skepticisms. We're in the process academically of encouraging students to think critically and come up with the counterclaims. That's what it is. So the counterclaims academically that students are pursuing in terms of their academic coursework, we also want to see that play out in terms of how they address information that they receive in a social or in something that's presented in the media. And so we welcome those skepticisms, those questions. We really want to see this as a conversation that starts this week and continues for the next couple years until we get data again. We're also tweeting, so we both have Twitter accounts that we use to highlight information, just the positive things that are going on at school as well as the data. So we're able to, obviously since there are so many positive things going on, retweet a lot of things that are already going on, as well as pull in headlines from national newspapers about trends in terms of substance use to show, kids love pictures, so to bring up the pictures and tweet those out about things that kids are doing that are healthy and safe.
And is that most teens at 99?
That's the most teens program.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We want to focus as well, as I'm sure many of you are aware, some of the norms and perceptions related to marijuana use are changing across the country or in certain states, including our own. And so what we want to do is to continue to monitor that and how that impacts student use. We do know that as students perceive the risk of using something like marijuana, as that perception of risk goes down, use generally goes up. And so that's definitely an area where we want to focus our attention. We want to educate students and parents even more about our concerns related to even recreational marijuana use. We want to inform families and students on the challenges of prescription drugs. We're becoming more educated on how problematic that can be to have to be storing unused medication, how some students may use that recreationally or share those, sell those, and we really want to make sure that we're educating parents and students about the problems related to that, as well as offer solutions about where they can drop off medication, how they can safeguard their medication, those kinds of things. And we know that families are busy. We know that it's difficult at times for families to get out for even educational opportunities that they see as being beneficial. So we want to use social media as an opportunity to reach out to families as well. So one of our goals this year is to make live a Facebook page for the district where we can begin sharing some of these. So there's so much education and information geared specifically for parents and families. We really want to make sure that they're picking up on those stories and getting that information.
So just to talk a little bit more about the social norms marketing campaign that the question was about. So as Keith said, today we trained between the two schools 400 leaders or so, 400 students who got to see a lot of this information, got to talk about it, got to question it, and then they will be the disseminators of that information to their classmates tomorrow. So really a students teaching students method. And it was a great day. It was a great, we did an in-school field trip for the leaders over periods 4 through 6. And it was great to see them interacting with this information. And that was kind of our goal, just to give it to them, to be open and honest, and using that language again and again of most teens are doing this, most teens are feeling this, are thinking this, to reinforce those positive choices that kids are making and to help them feel good about that. So using that data, throughout this week, but also to continue to release that information throughout the year in small amounts. So it's ones that students can remember and students can keep with them, and it's a touchstone for them. So we're also going to be presenting to parents and community members this Thursday evening at 7 o'clock at South High School. We'll be sharing some information from the survey that's specifically pertinent to parents. So parents' role in prevention and students' perceptions of their parents' attitudes towards substance use and things like that. So we're excited about that conversation as well. And the goal, again, being reducing overall use by empowering students with real, accurate pictures of what's happening. So we really, as Red Ribbon Week is the start of that, but really integrating those efforts throughout all of our programming. We have lots of other prevention programs, which I know you've heard about and hopefully you know about. Our Operation Snowball programs, for example. Last year, Keith and I worked very hard to integrate what we're doing at Snowball with our social emotional learning standards and our Common Core speaking and listening standards. So really trying to have students hear that same language about this is what good communication is, this is what healthy lifestyles looks like throughout those programs. We have our freshman transition programs, our Mad Dash Rush Corps Link Crew, Positively North Stars, our Mustang Way leaders, really trying to keep these students very aware of what we're doing and these messages so that they can reinforce them. And then really trying to look, with SAP in general, student assistance, the model is really getting all students across all levels. So not just through our programs, but any students who come to our offices for a variety of reasons. So as we mentioned, our PBIS programs, prevention being about keeping healthy students healthy, but we also intervene and support students who do struggle with substance use issues and try to be a support and a resource for families. We connect with outside agencies to assist our families in that way. Keith and I both work with students individually and in groups at school as well. We come in and support our athletics and activities programs through the athletic code. If there's a code violation, Keith and I are there to, again, support the students and families through those issues. And as I mentioned, we work a lot with outside local providers to help support our families and students.
We feel very privileged to do the work that we do, and I think these last couple slides here show some of the graphic ways in which we enjoy the work that we do, as do the students. So this is a slide from our Winter Snowball. One of the great things about our Winter Snowball program is we're drawing from both North and South. We have probably about 350 students as well as staff that attend this program, and again, giving them the opportunity to get away from school, to address some social emotional concerns, to get and focus and exercise the skill building that we're looking for out of the social emotional learning standards, to give them the opportunities to cross town, to make connections, and a lot of times just to have a good time without substances. One of the best things about the program and the retreats that we run is that it demonstrates that kids can have a blast all the time without using, and that's really what what Snowball in a lot of ways demonstrates. We also want and enjoy the work that we do. We want to see it continue, and this slide just really illustrates the different sort of levels that we're trying to work at. So we're working across the entire building. You can see in the bottom right corner, working with groups of students up to the top, getting into the classrooms as we do, and the opportunities with the lessons, the social emotional learning lessons with Mustang Way and Positively North, and then working informally to educate kids, like as the bottom left picture would illustrate. So we want to work with students in informal and formal ways to support their academic program and their success, but also their social emotional health, and feel very privileged to be able to do that, and appreciate the support that we receive from our administrative staff as well as the board and the community.
Wow. Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments?
I have a question, actually. Periodically, I speak to both of you about this issue of heroin, because we get a lot of notice that it's an epidemic in DuPage County. I also speak to the local police and fire personnel when I can about the same subject. And I'm sure there is an epidemic in DuPage County, but each time we've spoken, it's not your sense that it's here. I mean, in our schools at this point. Well, that can always change. It's not your sense that it's here, and I think basically this data confirms what your perception is.
It does. So we're not seeing necessarily the same. We're not impacted by some of the same concerns or challenges that some of the area schools may be. We want to be prepared. We want to continue to educate our kids and families about, obviously, the dangers of using or experimenting with heroin or any opioid use, any of this prescription medication that kids play around with. We really want to continue to educate in that way, but at the same time, we're not really seeing it. I do know that, so heroin use is changing in the sense that people from across the age spectrum are using or getting addicted at different times. So you have, young adults, middle-aged, elderly that are sort of taking the route of prescription drugs, and then they get dependent or addicted, and then they may kind of switch to heroin at some point. What we see, because for the young adults, for adolescent track, it's mostly kids that are smoking chronically smoking marijuana, or binge drinking or using hard liquor, particularly. So what we really want to do is we want to continue to focus our efforts on preventing marijuana use, chronic marijuana use, drinking or binge drinking, because that's really the pathway into young adulthood to something harder like heroin. Doesn't mean that it can't trickle down into the high school age group. We certainly want to keep monitoring that, but we don't see that really happening. And we've asked outside providers, what are they seeing and why do they think this to be the case? And I keep hearing a consistent message of kind of community personality. I happen to be a resident in Oak Park, so I'm kind of right next door to where the heroin sort of traffics out of. And in general, even though Oak Park alcohol and marijuana use is higher than District 99, there's not a heroin problem there at the moment. So for whatever reason, in terms of the community personality or the value system within the families, as well as the students, as well as the community organizations such as schools, there must be some protective factors there that are helping keep that use so low. So that's kind of what we're seeing. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that. So we're not seeing it. We continue to be in conversation. We actually appreciate when the Regional Office of Education reaches out, when Dr. McDonald reaches out, that kind of communication. We're both in constant communication with our student resource officers about what they're seeing, about what their concerns are. So that level of communication we want to see continue, because if something changes, we want to all be on the same page and we want to be working to address it definitely right away.
When you talk in terms of having a pulse for parents, for community members that may not be as in tune as you are as professionals in our buildings, how would you say you have an accurate pulse?
In terms of for the heroin use, or?
Just in general, whether it's chronic alcohol abuse, binge drinking, chronic marijuana, how would you allay fears that you do in fact have an accurate pulse?
Well, we really, now that we have this data information from the Illinois Youth Survey, we really look to that in a lot of ways for giving us some of that data that we're looking at. So when we look at the number of students that are binge drinking, if it's abnormally high, either against national numbers or county numbers or state numbers, or even higher from 2008, we might want to take a look at, hey, what's going on? How are we addressing this? How could we address this more appropriately, in the future? So like we would take that on as an area of concern and try and figure out how can we address that. So, are some of the students using? Are there more students using than we might like? Absolutely. We'd always like to see the numbers for alcohol and marijuana as low as we see for some of the other illicit drugs.
Right, I guess that's really the heart of my question. How do you know that those things are happening? Meaning, yes, you have now this longitudinal data, but how do you know these occurrences? How do you have a pulse on the occurrence? How do you know how and when it happens on a regular basis now moving forward? How would you know? Is it our resource officers? I mean, are kids telling you?
Absolutely. It's all of those things. So students that are coming in because there's been a code violation, students that self-report, information that we get from student resource officers, because we have reciprocal agreements with our law enforcement agencies. If there's something where there happens to be a party where not only do they find lots of alcohol, but they find something else, then they'll immediately be in touch with us about that, so we kind of have a sense of about what's going on. So absolutely, yeah. That's so with student resource officers, that's definitely a good source of information.
Thank you.
I would also say, I recall, I didn't work in District 99 at the time, but when this concept of the student assistance coordinator came up in the late 80s, early 90s, and the idea was to separate this role from the deans and the counselors and sort of segregate it out for the purpose of students coming to these individuals and sharing information with them. And because of Snowball, because of the training today, because of many of the other things that these two people engage in with kids, they've got quite a network. And I believe kids trust them, and so they will bring their issues. One of their functions is to help families when there are issues, to help families connect with service providers. And so they do have kids come to them in need. They have kids who bring their friends' issues to them, parents who bring their concerns about their own children to them. So part of their existence and part of the way their role is structured is to encourage that sort of informal network with kids, and it can be very effective.
Absolutely, and I would say, in terms of that trend data that you were asking about, even our non-using kids are good sources of information for sort of what's happening in the student population.
Sure.
Were there any differences that you saw between North and South High School? Any nuances that maybe at one school we might be handling things a little differently than the other, or in terms of our current approach as well as going forward?
You want to speak to that?
Not significant differences, no. Little ups and downs, little differences among 9th graders versus 11th graders, just kind of little things, but nothing drastically different. And we're looking at across all of the information that we're presented with related to school climate, academic expectations, use, all of that pretty consistent.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a perception when we talk about taking this data and getting it to the students so that they've got good information, and because sometimes their perception of things is different than the reality. Well, I think that could be said for our community as a whole, because I know that I've heard perceptions that South is a bigger high school, so more problems or something, and this is good information for our community here too, and that this is something we're seeing across both schools. Our kids aren't as engaged in substance abuse as some might think, or the prevalence of it. It's really good information.
I mean, like we said, we're trying to highlight the numbers this week with kids, so kids will know these numbers. And between Keith and I, we're constantly comparing what we're doing and saying with kids. Our numbers are all 2-3 percentage points within where we're at. I mean, they're really just very close.
We have an awesome community and 2 awesome schools. So, yeah.
Julia, did you have something?
I had a question too. I know you alluded very early in the presentation that you have some kids who say, "Oh, I'm not really being honest." Right. And I think it's amazing that they'll say that. Not really being honest.
They won't say they're not being honest. They'll say, well, everybody lies on those surveys. Well, did you lie? Well, no. But everybody lies on them.
And I wondered, I know that's always a perception I hear, oh, come on, they're not really being blah, blah, blah. Do you have any notion about how much of that, I know you can trust a large percentage of the data.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of figure on what you can't trust?
98% of our surveys were found to be valid.
Got it.
By the University of Illinois Independent. You know, and we don't touch those surveys or look at them when students complete them. In fact, we really try to do a lot to assure students that these truly are anonymous. So literally they didn't touch staff members' hands. The kids put them in the collection envelopes. A separate person got the envelopes. You know, we boxed them right up and they were out of our building that same day. So we really try to educate students about how that all works and be really transparent with them about that. Again, kind of the idea that the more honest we can be with them, the better. Yep. And then those, you know, internal reliability, validity checks that the surveys have. For example, there's one question that mentions a fake drug. And if the student selects that they've used the fake drug, that's a trigger, right? That they may not be honest on the survey, and that some students over-report use. You know, students assume, well, if everybody's being dishonest, they must be not saying that they're using, but actually they find some instances of over-reporting as well. So they really do, because these surveys have been around for so long, that, you know, they really have developed a pretty good system for checking those and, you know, asking the same question different ways throughout. And they flat out ask the students at the end, how honest were you in completing this survey? So they give the kids the opportunity to say that as well.
Thank you very much, because I think it's good for the community to know that this is really, really reliable data. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you both for all the work that you've done.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Dr. Kupka, the next report is a follow-up report by the athletic directors, activity director, and assistant principal Borman. And I'm going to be part of this presentation.
I like that. Well, I think that also is important too, just for the community to know that we're involved in just about education here too. I mean, well.
Ready? Okay. Last spring, the administration, primarily the athletic directors, activity director, Ms. Borman, assistant principal, and me began a serious look at our fundraising in the district. This was prompted by a series of events, including, but perhaps most importantly, the board's concern about a range of fundraising practices, and it just appeared to a number of people that we had a rather soft management of fundraising, that there were some things going on that were not what we would prefer to do, and that we really needed to make an effort to take control of these processes. And so we began meeting in the spring. I think there is some misinformation out there about fundraising. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But again, I think we found a rather loose system in place that had been passed down for many years.
Sure.
And so our goal was to clean that up, and it is our goal, and we are working on that. We're going to make a brief presentation tonight. We're going to talk about a number of things. One, about our messaging with the people directly involved. That would be the coaches, the boosters, and the parents. Two would be some of the accountability measures we put into place. Three, we're going to look at some of the things that we'd like to change about fundraising, going from selling stuff to events. Because selling stuff that often isn't very good stuff. Perhaps, and that does apparently fall a lot on the parents. As a former parent, I have a lot of gold cards sitting in the drawer sometimes. So, we'll commence the presentation, and each of us has a part, and at the end, we're going to take, each of us is going to share something we've learned, because I find that when you take the time to really study something in depth and can think about what you're doing, you always learn something that's helpful. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, Mr. Constance.
Thank you, sir. We thought we'd start out today by telling you what we've done so far since we were here last spring. The athletic and activities directors have been emphatic with our coaches, sponsors, and boosters about our expectations for following the protocols for approving all fundraising projects. On both campuses, numerous meetings have been held, both last spring and this fall, with all these groups to review the fundraising approval process. In both schools, systems are in place to document an initial request, generate a written approval, and then report the final outcome of the event. Both campuses have the data, North in paper form and South on a Google form. Ms. Borman will talk about this in a few minutes. One of the main points of emphasis in these meetings has been to communicate that all fundraising must have approval prior to the event. It doesn't matter how many years we've been doing it, doesn't matter whether it's off campus or on campus, and it doesn't matter whether the kids are involved or if it's a completely booster-driven thing. You must have approval prior to any fundraising. We believe our efforts are working. We have the hard data on the groups requesting to fundraise, and we have seen no unapproved events so far this year. We will continue to emphasize this message and explain the protocol as we move forward. We realize that there is a degree of turnover in the coaching staff, sponsors, and boosters, and the procedures and protocols need to be shared and reviewed with everyone on a regular basis. Further, we understand that even with the best of communication, we may still encounter an unapproved event. But we believe these instances will be rare and that the mechanisms are in place to greatly reduce the likelihood of such an event. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Borman, who can explain in further detail the documentation piece.
Thank you,
and I'll go man the computer.
Great. Thank you. So as Randy mentioned, we have added steps to the fundraising process within District 99 so that we can continue to improve the communication and management of these events consistently when working with students, staff, and community members. After discussing the fundraising process further last school year, which we did quite a bit as a group, we revised our initial request form for this reason, and I'll share that with you in just a little bit. The request form that I'm going to be talking about is currently a document that we ask people to complete several weeks, if not a month ahead of time before they request, before they go ahead with the fundraiser. So it's the steps they need to take before we even discuss planning it any further. And if it's an athletic event, typically the athletic director and the activities director would review and approve or not that form. If it's only an activity request, then the activities director alone would approve or deny the request. And as Randy mentioned, we've made it clear that a staff member cannot run a fundraiser within the district unless they've taken these steps ahead of time. And we have seen that it's worked well, and that this year we've seen that staff have been following the protocol every time, so we've been pleased with that outcome. Also, during the last school year, Denise, Randy, John, and I agreed that we would begin to ask staff to list specific information on the form related to the percentage of profits that will be made from each event, with a minimum of 35%. We decided to have this set percentage across the district, and we have communicated that in several ways to our staff members, so they are familiar with that range. And we've also put it on our document, which we have a PDF file of here. Now, North and South have this same form, but it looks a little different. At South, they're using a Google document, which we're talking about at North right now. This form, though, has the exact same information that South has, and we wanted to show you this form today so that you could see an active form where someone has filled out the information and what that looks like. The reason that we like this kind of form at both schools right now is because of the information we mentioned that's already documented there, but it's also a nice tool for discussion. So if we have a question about something, we want more information about the organization they're talking about, we have a question about the percentage of profit, everything's on this form. We need to sign it in order for it to be approved. So it's a good way through that initial screening process to really look at the form. If you can see on this form, it was for wrestling. Our coach was looking at using a restaurant at Pompeii to look for T-shirts for their team, and 50% is what the cost was, and he broke it down for us so that we could talk about that. He went to Denise for approval and then came to me afterwards, and that's how it moved forward. This is one that we just saw last week, so we thought we'd show it to you because it's recent. We've also continued to communicate the results of our fundraisers to students, staff, and families monthly in several other ways, including using the website, email, and conducting monthly meetings that typically involve coaching, advisor, student, or parent meetings during each session. So after the fundraiser is complete, we want to make sure that we get that information out to families and people in the community so they know what the fundraiser was, why we did it, and what we're using that money for. One example that we wanted to talk about at North would be our Fine Arts Booster page. And each month this group meets and records the minutes of their meetings, for example, on the Downers Grove North Fine Arts Booster website, which there's a link on the Fine Arts page at North. So if you go to their homepage, on the right-hand side, there's a link for the booster page, and it will take you right to their website. And on there it has information that really range from information about the booster meetings they've had, fundraisers, budget reports, and all of this information is public for people to review monthly to get updates on what's happening. So that's just one example of how we share that information with people. In addition, the athletic and activity directors have also given sponsors and coaches additional reminders throughout the year to continue to share this information with teams and activities consistently. And again, the purpose of this report is really to be as transparent as possible so that everyone involved understands the goals of each fundraiser. Overall, we believe that these steps have been helpful to have in place during the fundraising process. Sponsors are more aware of the profits expected because of the additional request on the form, and we feel that we're more thoughtful as a district when considering these types of fundraisers and thinking about who we're partnering with in the area. At this time, Denise is going to discuss fundraising further and talk about the additional costs and communication that we have in place and we're thinking about as we move forward.
Okay. Good evening. I'll be highlighting 3 areas this evening. Our goals, process, and communication concerning approximate additional costs per sport, which we talked about at the last meeting. Our goals were to present students' families approximate additional costs per sport beyond the district participation fee. We also wanted to communicate how to contact the athletic director for payment options or plans if necessary. This was important to make sure students were not participating in a sport for financial reasons, if you recall. We had that discussion. Randy and I began to gather and process information from all coaches on approximate additional fees. This list included gear, banquets, and travel, for example. Randy and I then met and created a grid including this information per sport. We discovered each campus has some...
Do we need a break to get that right graphic up?
We're going to pull it up at another point, I think, yeah.
All right.
So Randy and I then met and created this grid with the information per sport. We discovered each campus has some unique differences, but for the most part, we're very similar. One example is that DGS has implemented a larger travel schedule, and this is due to the competition in the West Suburban Gold, let's say, that they need to go out and get some more competition a little further. At North, we may not need to do that because our schedule is a little bit more competitive on the silver side. So that's one difference that you may notice. We then considered the best way to communicate the information to parents. We communicated the information through direct email registration to all parents, a link on our athletic site, and via coaches at parent meetings. We also included a message to contact the athletic director for payment plans on here. So Randy, we just happen to be on the North site. If you go to the athletic department sports and start dates, and you click there, And when that pops up, that's going to show you the grid, all the sports, approximate payments. And what we also did was put the coach's email right there for contact in case you had an additional question. So it was all on hand. So if that pops up, you'll see that. Otherwise,
might have to restart. My laptop went down 5-10 minutes ago. I had to go out and get back in to get it to work. So it might be a network issue right now.
Yeah. Well, as they're working on that, you'll see that grid. We also sent, and so at North, and then if you received it, if you happen to be a parent, you maybe received the registration process, which was new for us, and we included that information there. So this is where the information on fees are, And as you can see, both campuses came up with the language that we are sensitive that some families may have financial concerns. Please contact the athletic director if you'd like to discuss payment options. And an email link was provided, so right there a person would click on that link and send me an email if they had an issue. The data I can share from North is that I had 6 families contact me in the fall registration, and we made arrangements with them, and they were very happy with that. So that was a really good thing, and it was really good that we connected and were able to talk that out, and they had a person to contact. So now John will share the information on the fundraising events.
Can I just stop and say thank you for that?
Yeah.
I have 2 friends who have approached me, who never say anything about the schools, but have approached me about how much they appreciated it, so thank you.
Oh, that's
good.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great
Because their kids wouldn't participate because they weren't sure how much they had to come up with.
It was a really nice, it was a really good thing, really good thing.
That's great.
Thank you, Denise. As you're probably aware, recent nutritional guidelines by the USDA have limited what we can sell in schools, which comes on the heels of all our re-examining of our fundraising efforts. And now that we pair that with the reasons we fundraise, we're trying to encourage our clubs and teams to get away from selling in general for fundraising purposes. The selling of candy has already begun to be phased out because of the new legislation, and over the next few years that'll probably be gone. It's the way the USDA wants it to go. So we're looking at alternatives for selling items. The main reason that we're looking for these alternatives is more often than not, parents are footing the bill for the items the student has to sell. And we do not want to take money out of parents' pockets to purchase gold cards or candy bars, so we're looking at alternative ways to raise funds when they are necessary. One potential side benefit of fundraising is increasing community awareness of our programs and what our students are doing. So we are encouraging our sponsors and coaches to run events that can highlight the great things that our students are doing, allow them to bond with their teammates and friends, and provide a benefit to the community. Some of these fundraising events with which you're probably familiar, the Music Bowl at South, that's coming up on October 25th. And the fashion show at North. The Phillies and cheerleaders run a camp for little kids in the community, and the DGS wrestling program also runs a tournament for younger children as well. And these are just a few examples of what we do to raise funds for our program, really without selling things at both campuses. Additionally, we do work with vendors in the community to raise funds. Dunkin' Donuts gives a percentage of all their sales back to DGS on all late start Wednesdays, and that goes back to our choir program. And numerous other companies contribute a portion of their sales on specific days to various programs from both schools. In fact, I believe the example that Kristen put up earlier dealt with a restaurant that was giving money back to the wrestling program. So this is a common practice at both campuses, and it does not burden the families at all. There's no selling, and we just end up getting money to buy the things that they're fundraising for. So as we continue to work with our sponsors and coaches on fundraising, we'll continue to highlight and emphasize the benefits of community events as opposed to any selling of anything. Thank you.
One of the sort of unresolved issues of all of this is fundraising for uniforms. And I do want to touch on that tonight. And I want to make it clear that we budget and purchase uniforms for our athletes. Also for our band, also for our choir. And there isn't a need for our students and families to conduct fundraising in order to purchase uniforms so we can have a program. There isn't a need. That doesn't mean that some people wish to do that, but there is no need. And just to give you an example, South High, new wrestling uniforms and warm-ups, $3,100. New soccer uniforms, $6,000. New basketball uniforms, $4,000. I could get the same list from Denise. In fact, I think she sent it to me today. So we are spending tens of thousands of dollars on uniforms every year. So the narrative that we don't provide uniforms is just frankly false. Yeah, we currently allow fundraising for uniforms, and the question is why. And primarily the answer is that the students want to keep their uniforms. Some teams want personalized uniforms, so the kids can keep them when their career is over, and as remembrances of their time in high school. We do not purchase those because kids keep them and so that they are their property. We don't feel it's appropriate for the taxpayers to buy those because any uniforms we do purchase through school funds are used for several seasons for the varsity kids, and they're passed down to the sophomore and freshman kids, and that allows us to have a sort of cycle for purchasing that we can manage. We cannot buy new uniforms every year. That wouldn't be cost effective. That wouldn't be necessary other than the fact that kids want to keep their uniforms. Another reason kids want to keep their uniforms is personal hygiene. In other words, we have kids who are reticent to wear a uniform. There's certain parts of the uniform that somebody else has previously worn, and that's a personal preference, and that may change, and that's not standard between the two campuses. But as you recall, one of the issues last spring was track uniforms. And frankly, Denise surveyed the track parents at the beginning, or the cross-country parents, if they wore the same uniform. At the beginning of the year about their perceptions, and they are very supportive of purchasing uniforms. So I think it's out there that kids and parents want their kids to have their own uniforms, and whether that continues or not, we're going to see. One of the things that our ongoing discussion about uniforms with the coaches and boosters has brought to light is, this is just the question, do we really need to do this? Yeah. South High, for the first time in many years, the South High football program, they do not have their own uniform. They don't have names on the back of their uniforms. They're not personalized. Well, that was quite a burden off the parents. It was also quite a burden off the boosters itself, because they didn't have to. The boosters had purchased a percentage of that uniform in the past. This year they didn't have to do that, and that's been really positive since there's only 4 games in South, and they had weather to boot. So they didn't have the crowds to purchase those concessions. And that, I think that kind of message is positive in terms of whether we continue to have to purchase these items in the future. And of course, one of the issues when the students and parents do purchase uniforms is sometime in the future we get back to the narrative the district doesn't or won't purchase uniforms for the kids, which is wrong. And so to the extent we continue to do this, we have to make sure that the coaches and the boosters and the parents are very clear the purpose for purchasing the uniforms and the fact that they don't have to do so if they don't wish to.
Okay.
And hopefully the processes we're developing are going to make that aware and encourage perhaps in the future less of this practice. So what we've learned, Randy?
Well, there were many takeaways, I think, for all of us. One of the things that I landed on was that we need to consistently help our coaches and sponsors frame those communications to the parents and the students about what this is for and why we're doing it, and then the follow-up, that the fundraising effort should always be for that specific purpose and that it be transparent, that the parents and the kids are given a sheet, a spreadsheet, some sort of communication that lays out everything, what it's for and how much it costs. This is how much we collected and we purchased those items. So I need to help my coaches frame that communication, and I need to do that consistently.
I would say I agree with Randy. We've talked about that many times. Also, just that we want to continue to review the steps that we have in place during the fundraising process, which we would always do, but in this last year in doing that, it's really helped us to open up the lines of communication with our sponsors and our coaches, and to reestablish some of the expectations that were in place, but maybe we hadn't discussed for some point. So it's been helpful to go through that and just to make sure that we're doing that consistently and more often as time continues. And we've done that in the last year.
Have you codified that at all, Kristen? Meaning, is there a handbook or something that coaches and sponsors can tangibly have, whether it has their conference information, the school information, and now this fundraising information directly at their fingertips? Is there something tangible now that now they can incorporate and have?
Yes, and I know that, you know, at North and South this is true. In the age of our website and technology, we've been able to use a lot of PDF files to have links on our activities page. We've been working with Jill on the intranet to have a lot of documents there so that we can direct our sponsors and coaches to those places and talk with them specifically about registration information, you know, sponsor fundraising requests, things like that, and to guide them in those places. In the past, we've talked with them as well, and we used to have forms, you know, in our offices that we would direct them to. But I think certainly with technology, it makes it more easy for them to access the information, and I think smoother with our communication in order to share with them where to go and how to access that. And I know that as a group too, we've been mindful of continuing to bring those up whenever we have meetings, and we meet with our sponsors and coaches several times a year for different reasons. So that's become a normal part of our language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, echoing what everyone said, I think my big thing or my takeaway this year was we talked a lot about perceptions from the initial meeting when we were here, and I like to collect data to make sure what we're hearing is correct. So I think that assessing how we're communicating to people annually and making sure that we're clear on what is out there and what's going on is really important. And so, as Mark said, when I did the survey on the track uniforms and the cross-country uniforms, I was prepared to say if it came back negatively, we weren't going to do that anymore. And so I was rather surprised when over 97% of people were for and they thought it was cost-effective and all those things. So I think just collecting data and making sure we're understanding where everyone's needs are in the community is really important. So that's what I walked away with this year.
Yeah, and I guess kind of maybe just summarizing what everyone said, but just as we move forward, of course, we're going to continue to examine how and what we do with regard to fundraising, and as we all do with all our procedures, we'll reevaluate these and continue to improve our communication with the coaches and sponsors in the months to come. So.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as the 4 or 5 of you were talking and then disseminated your information to your sponsors and your coaches, besides the percentages, was there anything philosophically that you landed on that you were able to say, this is something that our district doesn't want to participate in? Was there something philosophical that became out of bounds that became aware, that everyone became aware of?
I think part of that, I think the 35% cutoff that we're utilizing with the sales, one of the philosophies, one of the ideas that we were opposed to was making anyone else rich. You know, we don't want our kids walking around selling things so that another company gets the money. So that was kind of I would say a philosophy that kind of guided some of this. And in both forms now there is, you know, it's very clearly stated that figure out the percentage, 35% or more, before we even start to talk about it. And if it's less, then you have to explain exactly why that might be and what's the benefit. Because I will say, for example, Dunkin' Donuts doesn't give us 35% of their sales on the Late Start Wednesday, but we don't have to do anything. There's no selling involved. It's basically free money because all our kids go to Dunkin' Donuts on Late Start Wednesdays. So they're very caffeinated when we start those Wednesdays. So I guess that would be the philosophy, that 35% really changed some of those conversations.
Thank you.
Although we didn't codify this, you know, going back to we had quite a lot of discussion about the mattress fundraising, because that apparently was embarrassing to people in the community. At least that's what got back to us.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It was embarrassing to people in the community.
The mattress.
The mattress?
They brought in different mattresses and tested them out.
And so while we didn't codify this, I think the nature of our discussion was that you cannot possibly describe every possible circumstance that may come forward.
Mm-hmm.
But it is our responsibility to think about this in a different way. At a higher level than the people proposing the fundraising activities to us. And if we don't like, or if there's something that bothers us about the request, we're not going to support it.
Well, benefit that
Terry first, and then Mike. Sorry.
Well, I guess going back to that 35%,
do you follow up and then see what the percentage really was at the end?
Yeah,
to
they do.
say, hey, you know what? This didn't work. You really, you told us it was going to be 40%, and it really ended up being 35 or 20%. So
We do, and at both buildings, we have a follow-up form that goes out to sponsors and coaches when the fundraising is over. Typically, you know going in what you're buying something for and what you're selling it for, so the percentages are fairly clear-cut, but there can be times when someone says, I'm going to buy 100 of these and we'll sell them all, and they sell 50 of them, and
Right.
in that case, then it wouldn't be that percentage. But yeah, we do have a follow-up that all our sponsors and coaches have to fill out that, outlines everything that they've spent, how they sold it, and what all the money was going toward.
And we, just so you, for an example, we did have one this year for the Athenas, and so it comes to me first, and the percentage was not, it wasn't appropriate. So it didn't even get, I had to send it back, and she negotiated with the company and received more money for the fundraiser she was doing for uniforms. So that was, so that actually happened, and then it went to Kristen, she signed off on it. So it's that check system never would have went to her, it wasn't going to her until I saw that it was within those requirements that we have.
just,
yeah.
Sure.
Mike?
Yeah, I was going to say that this seems to be just hitting on all the cylinders. I mean, it's exactly what I think we hope for in the discussions we've had and the concerns we had. I mean, the perceptions amongst parents and in the community about what was going on or what wasn't going on. There's some parallels here to the previous presentation, I think, in terms of looking at what the reality is versus what the perceptions are. But looking at, we had some concern about the burdens that this was placing on parents, and case in point, the anecdotal information you shared earlier, how there's actually parents that have come forward and said, hey, thank you for this. And I wonder how many years that's maybe been going on, that there's been an issue there that parents didn't know who to talk to or what, and didn't realize what they were getting into. Now they have that information, and then the real benefit in the end here is that all of the fundraising can be so much more effective. I mean, just now in the conversation, hearing how went back and was able to get more money, and causing folks who maybe have been using the same sort of fundraising methods over and over again over the years, because that's what they've always done, and maybe now looking at it and saying, maybe this isn't the most effective way to go about things. So the energy is placed in a way that is bears more fruit, and so efficiencies. So we of course have never-ending needs for more finance, more supports, and we want these efforts to be as effective as they possibly can. So I just can't thank you enough. I mean, really, this is fantastic, fantastic. So on behalf of parents, everyone, thank you.
Don't forget the rest of the board, so thank you. Were there any other questions? Or?
I just had one. Is there a limit to the number of fundraisers each group can have, or is it based on the needs as they come up?
Yeah.
I don't think we've established that.
Okay, that's not been an issue
It'd be
so
hard.
far.
Well, you talk to the marching band, or either band program will have numerous.
Right.
Because they raise $100,000 to go on a
because of their travel, right?
And they've got an army of kids and parents. They've got hundreds.
Sure.
So they can run a lot more.
Right.
Than say the volleyball program if they need something. So
the sports team is probably going to have one.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So it's really based on what their particular needs are.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, but let's also just take a moment, too, just to recognize the good work of all of our boosters, who we do appreciate.
Yeah. Oh.
And really, it's good to hear that some of the burden's off their shoulders from some of these things
all
as
happy
well,
about that?
Tremendous.
Yes. They support our children in
They do.
a huge way.
They support us in a huge way, so we're very grateful to have them, and we're very grateful to have you, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Another round of applause.
Okay, then I have two more reports, and I think they can be brief, because the board has had this information for a while, and none of that should be shocking to you, I hope. The first is, this is kind of the initial public presentation about the district goals for 2014-15. And I think if you have looked through this document, you would say that in many cases these are a continuation of work that we've already started going forward, because in fact many of these are multi-year. Frankly, that'd be true of all the goals for curriculum instruction and assessment. In terms of facilities, we want to place an emphasis this year on revisiting the guidelines for community usage of our facilities. And there's a number of questions. One of the questions is, at least when we first came up with this plan, the board had the intent of a certain amount of revenue, both to support a position in the district who is going to manage these, and perhaps also develop a pot of money that in the future would replace the skin on the artificial surface or the track or other needs that we have as a result of running our facilities. So that it's necessary, I think, to revisit that, and we'll make sure we're still on the same page. Obviously, we have found outside groups who will be willing to rent our facilities, but there's a certain cost to pay in terms of their effect in the neighborhoods. And those are real issues for us.
That's right.
So I think that's part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion, I think, is our guidelines for rentals, because we continue to have disputes among community groups about who gets to use what. And I think that's a fair discussion at this point in time. We've had this process in place for several years, and it's a good opportunity for us this year to look at that. Also, the big push in facilities is to complete the master facility plan, including getting community input, something we've not really been able to do to this point. And we want to look at the real effects of the master facility maintenance plan. We spent a fair amount of resources to develop that, and the goal of that is to help us plan our annual projects in terms of maintaining our facilities and not expanding or improving them, but maintaining them so they're available for future generations. In the area of technology, that's pretty simple. We want to continue to focus on staff development for one-to-one computing instruction. We want to focus on our pilot program that the board is aware of. And those are two huge initiatives for the year. And finally, we want to talk about how we're going to finance one-to-one in the future. I think we have to discuss that because we have some financial, at least some resource concerns in the future that may or may not materialize, but they are certainly out there. In terms of resources, personnel, staff development, and finances, our human resources is going to continue to focus on recruitment and appraisal of staff. Again, when we talk about our financial planning, we need to look at our future threats. I think Mark has always done a very good job of projecting what our resources and expenditures are, but yet I think right now we appear to be in a different situation in terms of possible legislative action. So we have to be prepared for that, and we're going to work on that this year should that action come up. We're going to continue to work on, in terms of communications, there's some new goals here. We're going to continue to seek ways. We're going to solicit input from the community that is getting information to us as opposed to pushing it out. I think we have improved vastly in our capacity to get information out to the community from where we were 4 or 5 years ago. But our needs right now are our ways to find ways to get the community to communicate back to us. So that one of those is the Community Advisory Committee that Mrs. Browning is going to manage, and of course our work with the master facility plan. And then we want to, we've just initiated this intranet communicate internally. And there are several possibilities that we want to take advantage of that as people get used to using it. In terms of the community, our focus is still on our community partnerships and developing more of them and developing the ones that we have or enhancing those. And I think the merger with Woodridge and Downers Grove might, because one of our big ones is that Bright Futures program, because of the merger of those two chambers that provides more resources and perhaps more entrees into the Woodridge community as well as Downers Grove. Then in innovation adaptation, we're going to develop a process where we can, we have an interest in our teachers sharing their professional knowledge with others, both in terms of the trainings, which frankly we are using big time at this point already, but also when they go outside the district and get information from other sources, a way for them to consistently share that back. And our ongoing efforts to collect data, measure what we do, and use that information to guide our work, that's going to be an ongoing effort, but we make progress every year. So these are our goals that we are recommending for the board to approve at the October meeting. And if you have questions about them either tonight or later, I appreciate you getting them to me early because I won't be here for the meeting when they're approved because I'll be recuperating.
Peacefully, we hope.
Yes. And quickly.
And quickly, that's right.
Quickly is correct, yes.
I think one of the things I would ask is, you just mentioned in 3.1C for technology, you mentioned the part about funding or finding some alternative revenue streams. Can we add that as a specific line item, or at least have it specifically mentioned in 3.1C as official language that is something that we want to investigate further?
Certainly.
And then along those same lines, can we also add that for 4.4? We keep talking about doomsday scenarios in terms of, general state aid and some other things. Can we also have now a line item that investigates alternative revenues, whatever forms they may take, whether they're corporate sponsorships, local sponsorships, grants, anything that might be able to be of some assistance, at least to investigate? I know it's something that we've been talking about for the last 4 years, but I think to actually have that in as a line item might be productive.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought in the past we said that that has been investigated, and we didn't think that we would have much truck with getting something for consistently funding for our operational needs. Through a grant for a special project, yes, but not for supplementing our operational budget for the long term.
Well, we had our budget discussion last month, and we asked the controller, what avenues have we been investigating? He said there was nothing that was there was no direction from the board. So that's kind of what I wanted to make sure, that there is some investigation, because I think maybe it's been anecdotal or season to season. It's not really been something that we've focused 100% on. And I think now that we have, SB 16 kind of looming out there, I think there should be a more proactive effort to look at something that could be a little more concrete for our use, instead of, it may come up, it may not come up.
Well, I would just offer, I will ask our controller, who's sitting over there, that, again, I don't have a problem with putting it into our strategic plan if we feel that there really is something viable out there. But I've heard that we've investigated this, we've investigated as part of the foundation, and that the well has run dry.
First of all, I'd say the question was there anything in the current budget that was from a new source or an outside source? And the answer was no. And I think there's two different ways to improve the condition of the district. One is looking at expenditure side and trying to reduce those costs, and I think that's where our focus has been, reducing administration positions when we can, and controlling that side of the budget. The revenue side is I guess maybe I won't say I'm jaded, but I know that experience has shown me, in just talking to my peers, if there was something where other districts were cooking things up and finding things, I think Libertyville allowed Rust-Oleum to name their football field. That's something we could talk about, those types of things. But those are one-time shots that the districts get. When I view something like a new revenue source, I need it to be for us to really project it and to use it for things, unless it's to buy a one-time thing. I would want it to be a viable long-term thing, and I don't see that now. If the board wants us to focus on that, it will take administrative time away from focusing on the other side, which is the expenditure side. And we spend a lot of time meeting with our own staff. How can we do things better? How can we do things without, we reduce a support staff person in the administration office this year by combining jobs. And we're still working out the bumps of that right now. So it takes a lot of time to do the expenditure side. Now, I'm not saying it's an impossible thing, but it will take time away from what we do in other places. And so if the board's direction is find something outside of the district that's new and innovative, that'll be an ongoing revenue source, we can spend resources and time towards doing that. I guess I feel it's more effective to look internally at the expenditure side, but certainly we can look. The other side of that coin is that that's also the same thing our foundation is doing, looking at those same corporate sponsors for projections or for projects for them. So we need to coordinate with them and not be knocking on the same doors. And I also would look at just at I won't say that they're not effective, but how difficult it is to find those revenue sources for schools. So
it's public schools.
Part of it is grants. Some schools can get grants, but it's really generally they're poverty related or based on poverty levels in the district. And even though ours has gotten worse over the last couple of years, so has everybody else. So I guess I am saying it's very difficult to expect much out of that. It sounds very good to say that, and I don't mean any offense at all, because everybody wants that to happen. Everybody would love to have corporate sponsorships of schools or different things that would support us. In the suburban area, these corporations are paying tens of thousands of dollars in property taxes, and I guess I am a little bit jaded or just not too optimistic about the opportunity of that being viable and the resources it would take to go making contacts in the business community saying we would like you to support something in the school, and by the way, it needs to be an ongoing commitment.
Sure, and that's not to say that we haven't done a good job or your department hasn't done a good job at reducing costs. It has. And I think when you're the average community member that sees their tax bill go up every year, that sees a past levy every year that goes up, and sees an increase in our budget about $1 to $2 million every single year, there's only so much that cost reduction can do. And one prudently would say, well, where else can we generate revenue? Where else can we look? And if we're not looking, if we're not making an effort, I'm not saying we have to spend 90% of our time doing that, but I think we'd be doing the community a disservice if we weren't doing some kind of investigation. And if that needs to be something in the way of looking, for instance, at technology and looking for something specifically funded for technology, we can do that. We can look to our business partners. We can look to collaborate with them. But there has to be some kind of plan, I would think, instead of, I'm cynical, I'm jaded, there's nothing out there, so let's just go with cost reduction. Because to the average taxpayer, there may be a cost reduction in salaries or a combination of positions, but the average taxpayer is not seeing that in their tax bill every year.
I mean, a lot of things we're doing now are really just defending the revenue we have. Sure. Right now, the focus is on
I understand that.
16, and so that's where we spend time making sure that the revenue pieces we have, because if we were to lose that, obviously there's going to be a more negative impact on the taxpayer.
Well, if I might interject, I kind of share the I'm not going to say jaded, but it's skeptical. It's skeptical that we would be able to find a steady, some sort of dependable alternative resource in terms of dollars, but looking at particularly the technology side of this, the one-to-one, and I think it does pose an opportunity. And this is a one-up sort of thing. It's a one-time shot sort of thing where we have a need to coming up next year. If we continue along this path, we're going to be spending all that much more to buy so many more Chromebooks. It might be an opportunity there to sell that one just one opportunity for some sort of corporate sponsorship or some sort of underwriting that might assist with that that sort of one-time expense that we're looking at having, that would help to reduce the burden to our parents and our students in having to fund that as well. So I'm not hopeful that we could do much in terms of an ongoing, but there is an opportunity here, because I know the foundation does work hard at this, and it's a hard sell when you're going to businesses and companies and you say, we need some money to help fund some extra things that we're doing in some of the classrooms to supplement some of our curriculum. But when you have something tangible like Chromebooks, I think maybe that's an easier sell and presents an opportunity maybe to.
Well, I think if you work in conjunction with the foundation
Right.
for the Chromebooks, that gives you a little more credibility, because a lot of the public businesses don't want to give to a public school.
That's right.
Sure.
They can give to a private school and get maybe if they give directly to a public school, they don't get a tax deduction for that. If they give it through the foundation, they do get a tax deduction for that.
So I guess the question would be, Terry, what can we do as a district to help support our foundation in that endeavor? I mean, you're the
Well, the problem with the foundation right now is it's all volunteer.
Right.
And to say we have not made any effort to fundraise is not correct. We have.
For sure.
That say we haven't approached corporate donors is not correct. That we have. We were not.
Say we, you mean the foundation?
Foundation. And frankly, one of the things that we didn't discuss in the fundraising report, if you look at all the fundraising that goes on in the district, you're talking about for maybe $500,000. If you look at everything. I mean, the band programs alone is about $150,000 a year. Sure. It's just the bands.
Football boosters.
Well, the boosters, it's the combined boosters is another $100,000, and then you've got all those, small groups that. So and plus the fundraising for philanthropy. I mean, you're talking a lot of money that's being raised, but we have had a difficult time as a foundation getting any traction. And we met today with a person from New Trier. She's the executive director of their foundation. Now, of course, New Trier is located in one of the wealthiest communities in the United States, and they have access to movie stars and mayors of Chicago and senators and all kinds of people like that we're probably not going to have access to. Yet, I think one of the issues that we have to resolve as a foundation is, if we're going to do this as volunteers, we're going to end up raising $10,000 a year. Want to raise more than that, we probably need to have some professional person in that role, because that person's running all the committees, that person's the one that, and a professional person knows how to fundraise with corporations, with different groups. They have databases, it's very structured, and it's very, but that's a different level than
we are at.
We're at. We are people volunteering their time, and many of our members have their own businesses or work.
Right.
Well, they're like you, Mike. You have your own business, self-employed, and they have the expertise to do a task, but they can't because they get busy. So we can't ask them to do that when their business is busy. So we need it now, and they can't do it for 3 months. So those are the kinds of things I think that the foundation is going to raise more money than at $10,000 a year. I think we have to look at something like that.
I would venture to say that might be a necessity if the district were going to be looking at either cooperating with the foundation or looking at other sources, because our staff is pretty thin right now. We might even need more professional help, and we'd have to factor that into our decision about whether we're going to pursue that kind of...
hiring a fundraiser? You're speaking about
corporate fundraising.
Corporate fundraising.
Yeah, I think we might need somebody to help out with that.
Well, one of the things that she mentioned to us today is that, and when she began at New Trier, it was a partnership, and the district helped with that
Oh,
initial,
okay.
funding for her.
For her, okay.
And,
For her salary.
And, I mean, they helped raise $100,000 to put new fields
Okay.
at their senior high school.
No, there was $1 million.
$1 million. Oh, I'm sorry.
Say, wow, that's
I
a cheap
forgot a
field.
zero. I'm sorry.
That's cheaper than what our fields
But-
were, that's for sure.
But I mean, that is
Same.
a significant amount of money, and she was instrumental in getting those funds. But, you know, it was a partnership, and like I said, if it goes through the foundation, it is a tax deduction for those.
Well, I want very much for our foundation to succeed, and you know, so
Yeah.
I think that, and I don't know, you know, what we can. I'd be interested in knowing what we can do as a board, what individually, and as well, you know, to help, as well as what we can do as a district to help those efforts, because we can talk about it all day long, but as you say, our resources are thin. We are doing an excellent job at cutting costs, and I mean, we have. I mean, there's no way we keep going the way we've been going without doing that, and it's going to be even more critically important going forward that we look at that expense side of things for sure. And no doubt that's the biggest bang for the buck, and so it makes total sense. So it seems to me that the foundation, though, is the linchpin here of maybe addressing some of these one-time infusions of assistance. And I don't know that we're doing as much as we could as a board and as a district to support their work. I used to be the vice president of the District 58 Education Foundation. We went through, we actually did hire somebody for a couple of years to help. It was not successful. I had to be the guy to let him go. Tell him, yeah, I mean, I have a little experience with this, and I understand the work that the foundation needs to do.
Well, and you've raised an interesting point. There's that foundation, there's the Park
That's
Foundation, there's our foundation.
Well, there's the Grow Foundation.
Grow Foundation.
I mean, all kind of go into the same well. So, and then.
So just to sum this up then, could we, to your point, Mike, Terry, when next time you go back, or Mike, when next time you go back to the foundation, can you explore if there are other ways that we can work, the board can be more supportive of the foundation? And then to Keith's point,
yeah,
you know, is there, I would hate to see us put knowing that the money's not out there, knowing that grant funding, because I believe we apply for grants too, periodically as they become available, knowing that all that money is drying out, I would hate to see us put in our strategic plan that we're going to find external sources of funding when.
So you think it would be a negative to at least try to investigate alternative revenue sources in the economic times in which we live? You think it would be just a negative situation, not even worth pursuing, not even worth trying?
I think we have done it, and we have come back without anything.
I don't think we have the data on that.
And
I would question that.
I think it's hard to expect our staff to spend, you know, a significant percentage of time doing that and coming up dry. And so I have a really hard time with that. When in fact, if we could work with the foundation a little bit more, I think that's the alternative. And
maybe that's the place to start.
Well, at least that's trying. I mean, that's doing something.
Right.
Without making it a formal board goal, I think, to your point.
Right.
It's that would be difficult to live up to.
But if something is not in the strategic goal, whether it's through the foundation, whether it's something else, we're really sending an interesting message to our community that we're going to raise your taxes every single year through a levy, through our budget, every single year, but we're not going to investigate alternative sources.
I understand what you're saying.
Well, I think we are. If we work with the foundation, then I think then we are sending that message.
Okay.
And we don't have to have our staff taking the time of doing the jobs that they're hired to do away from that. And I think
So then could that aspect be added as a line item to the strategic goal or no?
I think that we can work with the foundation. I'm not sure I want to put it on that document. I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry.
I just don't think it's the right place for that, because I think
Well,
that
I do know that with as far as technology is concerned, it's already in a strategic plan that we were looking for, additional funding to help support that, and that's. And
that
I'm
seems to be
suggesting
the most viable place.
Yes, and we've brought it up a few times before, and I'm just suggesting that in order to move this forward, that the foundation. I'd just be interested in knowing if the folks who are there working hard at the foundation could wave a magic wand. What would they ask for from us to help them in trying to address some of these needs that we have.
well, I think that they are working with Dr. McDonald to get lists of our alumni, and we're working with the both of the Woodridge and Downers Grove Chamber of Commerce's to get lists of and to send out a mailing that says, hey, these are our needs.
Right.
I think that could be huge.
And
that
I mean,
could
that's
be huge.
just, and Mary Ann was showing us some of the things that she was doing, and gave us some good ideas on where to start and what to do. And don't you think, Dr. McDonald?
Yeah, I do. But we're going to have to invest more in it.
Right.
And not just people, time. Not just effort, where you have to invest money to move forward.
And just so the board is aware, my umbrella intent is, my biggest fear is this doomsday scenario where SB 16 gets enacted, and now we have a doomsday scenario that says we have to cut all these programs and or raise the fees in such a dramatic way that will impact all of our families, and that's something that I want to avoid if we can be a little more on the proactive side.
Or have to go and ask for additional monies via referendum beyond CPI, which would.
See, and I guess I hear what you're saying, and I actually agree with you, but I think in this particular instance, it seems to me that we have investigated this in the past and come up dry. And perhaps we can think of some other idea, but I hate to, what would that be? What would that look like? And I think it's a good maybe a good compromise to work with the foundation to see if we can do more. Is that fair?
Sure. I just know, for instance, we talked about corporate sponsorships about 8 months ago. And do we just leave that on the table, or are we ever going to revisit that, for instance?
Well,
on the athletic side of things.
Yeah, well, we talked about it in the context of fundraising, and we talked about it in the context, I'm thinking out loud, we talked about it in the context of getting sponsorships for some of the different potential. I think we never really defined what that was going to look like, because there was some thought about, well, would we let people put a scoreboard up with their name on it and things like that. You're right, we never did follow up with that.
And that's...
It's on the parking lot.
Yep. It is in the parking lot. And as much as, and there could be some sort of, albeit not a very large revenue stream, but there could be something there in terms of, and this is something the board needs to talk about, I think, what level of advertising are we comfortable with? Where are we willing to go with that, right?
That's right.
Seriously.
Yeah, but it's also a short-term, it's not going to be an ongoing operational stream, which is what I think you're talking about.
But it could
having
be.
something that continually adds significantly to our bottom line.
I've seen schools have $100,000 corporate sponsorships, either for sponsorships of fields, signage. $100,000. I couldn't write a check for it, and I think that would be something. It's better than nothing. That's all I'm
for
saying.
a given amount of time,
Sure, it has to be a 5 years, let's say.
Absolutely.
You sign a contract.
Look at right now. They're trying to decide what to do with U.S. Cellular Field because they're not paying up.
Right.
So, do we want to be stuck with?
It's not the be-all and the end-all. But
And these are things that maybe aren't Education Foundation issues. These are things
They're
that
not.
So I think if we could look at that a little bit.
Have a round table.
That would be appreciate it. Figure out where we're comfortable with that.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Deb?
I said a roundtable discussion.
But I don't know how to put that in.
Okay, so can we, can we move this to another discussion, maybe a workshop for another night? Maybe get some other minds around it, and, because we can always add it later to strategic plan, can we not, if we decide?
We can try to wordsmith it.
We can always add to it.
Make it better.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna, I mean, our interest is to pursue the success of the foundation. We're gonna do that regardless.
Absolutely.
That's right.
It's just a struggle, I think, is to do it with solely volunteers. And they're good-hearted people, and everyone's willing to give their time and have. But it's just, to make it better, it needs more than that. It needs somebody who's committed to it as a job. And I think if we get, you would have to get the right person, because I've heard the same story that Mike discusses. It was not, there are other places where they had someone that crashed and burned. It wasn't worth the money. But.
Well, I believe that our foundation did the same thing years ago, too.
Could be.
Hired somebody?
Yeah, well,
so what if I wordsmith it because it's 9:23?
Well,
and everyone's tired and we have one more presentation.
And can we put it, maybe do a workshop on it as well?
Certainly can, Dr. Kupka.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald.
Yes. Whenever it will fit in, as soon as possible.
Draft of the board meeting actions by month?
Yes. Thank you very much to Julie, who put this together.
Yep.
What we did following the last meeting where this was discussed, we took I think we took all of your input and adjusted this document, and now it's color-coded. And again, the items considered expedited review are those that really don't need a long discussion. They're just there and approved. They're no-brainers. They're something we have to do.
Yeah, I thought it looked very good.
The full review, 1 month or less, an example might be the discussion we've just had, where we're actually presenting information and voting on it at a later meeting, but we may not do it we might do it less than a month. Then the full review is things that there will be at least 2 meetings, 2 business meetings in the decision-making process. And we are hoping that this met with the board's approval tonight, and we will commit to working with this from now on.
I liked it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Appreciate the work you've done on it.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Any other discussion on that?
I think it's going to be an invaluable tool going forward, and there's been some miscommunications and missed expectations here. I think this will eliminate.
Keep it in front of us all the time.
Keep it at lower rate.
Sure. And it'd be helpful, I think, to a new board member coming on. If there is a new board member next year, or members, it would be a useful tool to understand. Because I know I'm about 3.5 years sitting here, and I'm finally starting to
still learning. I know.
Finally starting to feel like I know what's going on. And there's a season for things.
I'm there with you, Mike. I'm there.
I know what to expect.
So helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for a reception of visitors. This is an opportunity for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Hearing none.
Maybe the cameraman would like to talk to us.
Yeah, maybe.
We have a meeting on Wednesday that is closed, starting at 7.
Wednesday here.
Wednesday.
6:30.
6:30
Food will
Wednesday.
be provided.
Dinner. 30.
Okay.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.